Today, we're diving straight into a gardening mystery that honestly drives so many of us completely crazy. The mysterious connection between tossing down some granular fertilizer on a crisp September afternoon and somehow getting those massive, dense clusters of blooms the following spring. We're talking about why tired spring roses just can't seem to be fixed in the spring, and how one incredibly simple fall shift changes absolutely everything.
We have all been there, right? You spend the entire growing season doing everything perfectly by the book. You're out there watering consistently during the dog days of summer, you're meticulously deadheading the spent blooms, you give them that standard spring feeding, and yet, after all that work, you're rewarded with weak stems, barely any buds, just a completely disappointing first flush every single May. Honestly, it feels like a total betrayal by the plant. You sit there thinking, okay, what on earth am I doing wrong this spring? But here's the wild part. The answer isn't in the spring at all.
Now, to really grasp the solution here, we first need to look at a history of entirely logical mistakes. Think about it like this. Year 1. The strategy is a spring-only feed, right? Give it a big boost in April and just let it ride. Well, the result was the plant pushed hard all season and had literally nothing left in the tank by fall. Okay, so year 2. The tactic shifted to a summer monthly feed, because more food equals a stronger plant. For sure. Well, actually, no. That high nitrogen diet just pushed leafy green growth, but did absolutely zero to prepare the plant for winter. So finally, year 3. Out of sheer fear of late season feeding, all fertilizer was just stopped completely by August. And that just left the plant starved precisely when it needed fuel the most. 3 completely different, reasonable strategies, 3 identical disappointing springs.
So this incredibly frustrating history of trial and error ultimately led to one massive question. Our source realized he had this neighbor, Robert, whose roses were just legendary. Robert's garden was consistently putting on this show-stopping display every single spring, totally outshining everyone else on the block. So the question was simple. What in the world was Robert doing differently?
Let's just sit with this for a second, because it completely reframes the entire gardening year. The best bloom I get every spring was decided the September before. We are so deeply conditioned to think of rose care as a spring and summer chore. But Robert, he wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was talking about a fascinating delayed gratification strategy that happens exactly when most gardeners are literally packing their tools away for the season.
Section 2. The biology breakdown and why potash changes everything.
To understand why this method actually works, we have to look at what's going on beneath the surface. In early fall, it is so easy to look at a rose bush and just assume it's winding down, getting sleepy, preparing to do a whole lot of nothing for winter. But biologically, it is working overtime. It's actively packing energy deep into its roots and canes because it has 2 massive jobs ahead. First, just surviving the harsh winter dormancy. And second, it is frantically stockpiling the exact fuel needed for that very first spring flush. It has to do this now, because in early spring, the plant hasn't grown enough leaves to power itself through photosynthesis yet. That explosive May bloom runs almost entirely on the energy it packed away the previous fall. And this brings us to exactly why regular fertilizer fails so spectacularly in the fall. Standard fertilizers are super heavy on nitrogen, and nitrogen's main job is to push leafy green growth, which is great in June, but in September, it pushes vulnerable new leaves right before the frost hits, essentially guaranteeing cold damage. Potash, on the other hand, does the exact opposite. It skips all that leafy growth and goes straight to work supporting root strength, thickening the stems, and locking away that crucial energy storage.
So let's define this clearly so we know exactly what we're working with here. Potash, which is also known as potassium, is the essential nutrient that builds that tough internal structure. By using a high potash feed after those summer blooms finish up, but right before the plant goes fully dormant, you are essentially opening a hidden bank account. You're making this massive energy deposit that next year's spring bloom entirely depends on.
Section 3. The fall feeding system. The actual system itself.
Okay, so how do we actually pull off this late season strategy? Well, there are 5 specific steps to Robert's system. And it all kicks off with step 1, early fall timing. The sweet spot is early to mid-September. You basically want to wait until the main summer bloom cycle is clearly finished, but you absolutely have to get this in well before your first hard frost.
Moving to step 2, you've got to read those labels carefully. The numbers on the package matter immensely. You can't just grab whatever half-empty bag is sitting in your shed from June. You need to look for a bloom booster formula or a high PASH feed, where the potassium number, that's the very last number in the 3-number sequence on the bag, is noticeably higher than the nitrogen number. We are completely reversing the standard spring ratio.
Step 3 requires a bit of precision. You'll want to apply this carefully around the base of the plant and then water it in thoroughly. But listen, here is the absolute most critical part. Strictly follow the specific product rate on the package. More is definitely not better here. This isn't meant to push rapid growth, so dumping extra on won't give you a bigger plant. In fact, over-applying risks introducing way too much nitrogen through contamination, and that could trigger the exact tender, vulnerable new growth we are trying so hard to avoid.
Step 4 is honestly the hardest part for us overachieving gardeners. After you apply this single high potash feed, you must stop feeding entirely. That's it. Do not give the plant a single drop of anything else for the rest of the fall, even if it looks like it's still actively growing. You just have to step back, let go, and allow the plant to safely and naturally drift toward its winter dormancy.
Which brings us to step 5, 7. That is the number of months you're going to be waiting for a genuinely massive payoff. It is the ultimate test of gardeners' patience, but I promise you the results are worth every single day of that wait.
Section 4, the long game and the invisible payoff.
Let's talk about the physical results you'll actually witness. I really want to set expectations right now. You won't see anything different this fall. The plant is going to look completely unremarkable heading into winter. You might actually stand there wondering if you just wasted your time and money. Don't panic. That total lack of visual action above ground is actually a perfectly normal sign that all of that energy is being directed exactly where it needs to go, straight down into the root system.
But then comes spring, long before your regular April feeding even has time to kick in, you are going to see an unbelievable difference. The plant will push out noticeably more vigorous new growth, you're going to see visibly more buds forming, and maybe most importantly, the stems supporting those buds will be substantially thicker. When that first flush finally opens up, it won't look thin and it definitely won't be quickly spent. It's going to be a robust, show-stopping display, all because it's running on premium fuel stored up from the year before.
It all comes back to this philosophy. Today's growth is often the result of a decision made months ago. As gardeners, we forget this all the time, don't we? We judge our care by what a plant looks like right in front of us at this exact second. But doing that completely ignores the long, slow timeline the plant is actually operating on. We literally have to think seasons ahead.
So if you want that incredible show-stopping May bloom, the clock is ticking. Mark your calendar for early September. And I'd love to know, are you brave enough to ignore your plants in the spring and trust the fall process? Let me know what your typical spring bloom actually looks like, and if you have ever fed your roses this late in the year before. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you in the next one.